Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar for the next 30 minutes or so, having this incredible conversation with Audrey Kintzi on the topic of navigating through nonprofits, navigating opportunities in the nonprofit sector. I'm Mary Jacobs. I am the Associate Dean of the Graduate Programs here at St. Mary's in the School of Business and Technology, as well as the MBA Program Director. And with me is Audrey Kintzi, who's the Executive Director in Philanthropy and Development in our master's program, as well as overseeing our master's in nonprofit management certificate. And we've got 20, 30 minutes worth of information that we would like to share with you today. At the end, we've got some time available if you've got some questions that you'd like to ask of us. But we're really excited to spend some time with you today. This is third in a 6-part series that we've put together for our school. We did 2 in the fall, and we've got 4 starting today for the start of 2025. So thank you for your time. We're glad you're here with us today, and we are excited to share some information. Audrey, I'm going to let you give a little more background information about your incredible credential and the work that you've done.
Thanks so much, Mary, and thank you all for being here today. I have worked in the nonprofit sector for my entire professional career, so 40 years of working in the nonprofit sector, and it's an exciting area to be in, especially today. It's growing by leaps and bounds. As this study from Johns Hopkins has said, about 1 in 10 jobs is in the nonprofit sector in today's private workforce. And there are about 1.8 million nonprofits in the United States, and we employ about 11.9 million people, making us the 3rd largest industry. And those are some pretty big numbers, and people kind of go, really? I guess I didn't think that. We are 6% of the country's GDP. So the sector is huge and vibrant and growing, but it doesn't come without some challenges. Right now, we are seeing that about 71% of our nonprofits are seeing an increase for the demands in their programs and services. Some of this is coming out of COVID. Some of this is coming out of some of the health issues that are around and about us, and some of the things that happened in the wake of George Floyd and some of the civil unrest. And we're seeing more and more the need to be serving people, but we're struggling to have enough people to serve our clients. 68% of our nonprofits say they're going to have to cut programs and services in the next 2 years. And that's really about resources. And so, fundraising becomes a really critical part of the nonprofit sector because we have to have money. I would say no mission, no money, no mission, no mission, no money. So if we aren't raising money, if we aren't providing revenue, we can't do the programs and services. And, we're continuing to see our expenses rise. We're continuing to see that nonprofits don't have the resources they need. And we're seeing now with some of the challenges happening with some of the government cuts in funding, it's only going to get worse. So it really becomes important that we are good at raising money from the private sector, from individuals. The scary part is that there just aren't enough people. So about 3 out of 4 nonprofits said that they have vacancies and that they haven't been able to fill them. I was telling Mary this week that I get a couple calls a week from presidents, CEOs looking for a fundraiser. They can't find a fundraiser. They're struggling to find a development director for their organization. And so we really need to think about how we're building and growing that next generation of nonprofit professionals and fundraisers. The shortages are not just in fundraising. And again, when we have the shortages on the program side, people are waiting to get our services. And that makes it really hard when families need those services and we don't have the people to provide them, whether that's counseling or housing, all sorts of things like that. 3/4 of the respondents in this survey, and this was from the Nonprofit Quarterly in February of 2024, nearly 3/4 of respondents cited salary compensation as one of the challenges. Again, because we're in the nonprofit sector, we tend not to have the same kind of salaries that the for-profit sector has. And so people are like, hey, I need more money. I can't afford to work in the nonprofit sector. And I think we're seeing that change, but it's still challenging. And we need to come up with a stronger workforce to support the nonprofit sector. And part of that is education and helping people learn. So, Mary, I think maybe it would be good for us to kind of switch into some questions and
Great segue. So thank you for your insights. And I think you're painting a clear picture, right, of some of the challenges that the nonprofit sector is faced with. Number one is finding good employees, qualified employees too, who are also aware of compensation. So you've given us the overview of the challenges. So what are some of the opportunities that you see right now, also in the nonprofit sector? And I know you're very involved in the Twin Cities nonprofit community, and you talk to a lot of nonprofit leaders. So here's the reality of some of the challenges, but what do you think some of the opportunities are as well?
well, what I like to tell students is that really you can write your own future in the nonprofit sector. There are so many opportunities, so many positions, program, marketing and communications. People say, well, I went to school and my degree is in business. I don't know if it translates. Absolutely, it translates. We always talk about how nonprofits, that's a tax code. Being a nonprofit, it's a tax code. It's not a business strategy. We have to run our nonprofits as businesses. And so we're really looking for highly qualified people who can do the accounting, do the finance, who can work with evaluation and outcomes. Really important that we're able to show that what we're doing in our organizations is making a difference and that we can report to our funders, hey, we did this and we did that, and here's what changed. So, really critical.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more. What do you think are some key leadership skills to be a nonprofit professional? So, Kayla, I just saw you put up here about your background in mass communication, right? And you're currently the annual fund manager. So, thinking about your example of someone who didn't probably study nonprofit management and how you graduated with this degree, and now you're doing something altogether different in your career right now. Not uncommon from my perspective and my experience with talking to nonprofit professionals. So, Audrey, when you talk about skills and what helps someone either that's attracted to the industry, like what is it about the nonprofit sector that's attractive? And then what are some of the skills that people need to have to be successful from your perspective?
Yeah. And Kayla, I love that because my background was mass communications, public relations. And that's one of those skill sets, being able to write and being able to speak, having those two skill sets, really being articulate and being able to, craft memos, press releases, newsletters, social media, all of those things. There are so many roles in the nonprofit sector. And people tend to think about one thing like, well, it's a nonprofit, so they're like people who are social workers. Well, there may well be social workers at the organization, but there are also finance people, and there are also business people, and there are also communicators. And so it's really saying, hey, here's what my skill set is. Let me look and see what opportunities are in the nonprofit sector to see if I can put my skill sets to work in the nonprofit sector. Yeah, and I think that's really the call for all of us to be thinking about how do we take the skills that we have and bring them to bear on a nonprofit that really needs us, really needs our help and our support.
So could you identify, and maybe I'll feed you some ideas too, organizational skills, communication skills, right? Fundraising, clear, and I know we're gonna spend a little more time a little later on in our webinar to talk more about the importance of fundraising. But when you think of those leadership skills, management skills too, that really assist you in building your career, I think we'd all agree that those make good common sense, and not just in the nonprofit sector, but also in business, in healthcare settings, and whatever kind of work that you did. Good fundamental business skills, right? Just do make a difference in being successful in a nonprofit. Can you talk, Audrey, a little bit about the different kinds of roles? So if someone just graduated from college recently or graduated with a master's degree and now they wanted to pivot and get into a career in nonprofit, what are some of the roles that they should be looking for? And maybe if you can kind of step up from here's an entry level, this is what you should expect, and how you could advance in your career in the nonprofit sector.
Sure. So typically what happens, the entry level kinds of roles in nonprofits are the people who are, running the blood mobile. So they're greeting people and they're doing the intake for people, or they're the people who are creating the special events for a nonprofit, the a-thons, the walk-a-thon, the all of those special events that we've all participated in. And really finding that entry level, I always say, do informational interviews, do as many informational interviews as you possibly can with nonprofit leaders, because when you've met one nonprofit, you've met one nonprofit, and no two nonprofits work exactly alike. And so for some nonprofits, they have a lot of rank and file people working in the food shelf, people who are working with intake for clients who are coming in and needing assistance. And those are skill sets that come in part from getting your degrees and going to school, but also from experience. And I always say, when you're in college or when you're just out of college, volunteer. Volunteer for the Red Cross, volunteer for the local hospital, see how the organization works, start to see roles that you kind of like, that's really interesting. I think I might want to do that job. I think I might want to work as a lab coordinator, or I might want to work as somebody who's working with the blood mobiles. The whole social media area. I had a student who was working for Be the Match, and her job, just straight out, was to get people to want to donate organs, right? And that's a tough sell. She said, you'd think everybody would want to help a person, right? And she said, but I found it to be a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And so she really started talking to people and seeing, what it was that they were nervous about, or what it was that caused them to not want. And part of it was they were afraid of having surgery, all these things, right? So then she started creating communications that kind of got at that. I think creativity is a really important part of the nonprofit sector. We have to do a lot with very little. And so trying to figure out how to get, and I hate to use that biggest bang for the buck, but we really do have to see how we can make the dollar stretch as much as possible. And it does take some creativity. It takes some ingenuity and, kind of, let's see, we want to do an event. We don't have a lot of money. Oh, I know, we'll get a partner. So we get a partner to help with the event, and they're the sponsor. It's all those kinds of things that really a nonprofit staff member has to be willing to roll up their sleeves and just kind of dig in. It's not necessarily as simple as coming to the office and sitting in at your desk and starting to do the work. It's often creating the systems. It's creating how we're going to do this or how we're going to do that. It's figuring out how we're going to do seminars or blood mobiles, or how we're going to get. And so it's really about creativity and problem solving.
I'm going to add a perspective too, Audrey. So I was the president of the board of the Alzheimer's Association when I lived in Seattle several years ago.
Oh,
And
yeah.
our fellow board members all had an affiliation, whether it was a parent, in my case, it was grandparents that had Alzheimer's. And so that whole board, the executive director and his team, was made up of people that had some kind of attraction to the mission. Most of them had had a personal experience. And we used to offer an annual event, if you will, a big fundraising event. And we would partner, our board was made up of, different levels of people in the business community, again, all of them who had an affiliation with Alzheimer's. And then they were asked to go out and then invite friends, family, and colleagues to attend our event. And we raised a substantial amount of money But that struck me, and it's probably one of my longest and most compelling experiences as being a member of the board and then a board president, about that affiliation to the mission and then finding that. So when you're talking about people that are fundraising or doing outreach, I think it's really key that people understand if there's something, especially that's personal for people, that
Yes.
that might be the reason, right? That someone is willing to donate or to open up their network or do whatever capacity you need for them. But oftentimes I think it's that personal connection to the
Yeah, absolutely, Mary. And now I always say I can teach anyone development, but I can't teach passion. And
Mhm.
it's really, if you have a passion for the mission, if you love the work that the organization is doing for whatever reason, again, it could be a family experience, a family member, a neighbor, a loved one, right? But it could just be something that you love animals, you love dogs, you love cats. So you work at the Humane Society and you find out that actually is something that could be a career. And you never thought about a career working for the Humane Society, kind of thought that was a volunteer thing, but actually there are jobs at the Humane Society. But it's really about being passionate about the work, because if you're passionate about the work is a lot easier. If you don't like what you're doing, if you don't like what the organization does, it's really hard. It's really hard to go to work, right? To get yourself up and go to work. So when I have people come and do informational interviews with me, I'll say, so what are you passionate about? What are the three things that, really excite you or get you up in the morning? And then they'll say, well, kids or the environment. I'm like, great. Let me introduce you to some people who are in the environments, nonprofits, the Minnesota Environmental Fund, that kind of thing. And that's a really critical piece, is being committed to an organization that you care deeply about.
And it could be start off as a volunteer, could potentially, if you want to find a job or work for that organization. Sometimes it evolves into something along those lines as well. So, how do nonprofit leaders find good employees? Kayla, I appreciate what you're contributing here on the chat. So clearly you're doing well and have had great success, and maybe we'll have you chime in at the end here, but how does the executive director or the vice president of development or programming, how do they find people? So people that are interested in, like, how to get my foot in the door. Do you have some ideas and perspectives about what they can do to be successful getting into? Because sometimes people just want that first job, just that first opportunity, right? To demonstrate that they're good and they're a good fit for the organization. What are your recommendations?
Right. Well, I always recommend networking, networking, networking. So, both for the employer and the employee, trying to find the right people, you have to constantly be talking to people. I went to work for a woman that I had sent a congratulatory note to, and she sent me the most beautiful note back. And I thought, whoa, I'm really impressed with this woman. Like, someday I'm going to work for this woman. And I absolutely did. I went to work for her. She was my boss at the Courage Center. But it's getting to know people and saying, that's somebody I respect. That's somebody I really think that I could work for, or that's doing important work that I want to be a part of, and really finding opportunities to connect. It is harder and harder for nonprofits to find employees because there simply aren't enough people going into the nonprofit sector. I mean, it's part of why we do sessions like this. We're like, guys, there's a lot of opportunity in the nonprofit sector. Please, 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 look at the nonprofit sector, see what there is available, and really make yourself aware of opportunities in the nonprofit sector, because it's a really rewarding career. It can be a really rewarding career. And we simply don't have enough people to fill all of the positions that are out there. And I hear people say, I've been trying to get a job, and, I've applied for this job and that job. And I'm like, well, have you applied at a nonprofit? No. And I'm like, well, you should apply at some of the nonprofits. Well, I don't know anything about nonprofits. Yeah, but you know about marketing and communications, you know about public relations, you know about communications. Those skills are absolutely transferable to the nonprofit sector.
Totally agree. So what I hear you say, volunteering is key. Informational interviewing, right? So take that opportunity to meet with people that you're interested in learning more about their organization. It's a good opportunity, right, to build your brand and for people to know more about you. networking, going to events. Those are really good opportunities for people that are interested in a particular organization, to get known, to potentially pursue a job opportunity, a career opportunity, and career growth. I'd like to transition, Audrey, because in addition to having this wealth of knowledge and background around nonprofits, I know what's near and dear to your heart is development and fundraising. And I know you also obviously run as the executive director of the Philanthropy and Development Master's Program, which we'll talk a bit about. I'm going to give you a couple of examples very recently. I was at an event a couple weeks ago, and I randomly sat next to an executive director with a small healthcare. And I was telling her about your program, and she said, I hate fundraising. And I'm not surprised by that, right? Because as an executive director, she has all this responsibility to run the organization. The part of going out and asking for money was really a stretch and not comfortable for her at all. And I remember I connected you with her just to think through, like, you might be able to give her some sage advice. The other part was just at an event last week, and I'm on the board of an organization here in the Twin Cities, and one of the committee chairs was asking for people to be a part, and she was the development committee and trying to get more people from this organization involved. And she said, you will never regret the experience that you get by being a part of this committee, because I'm going to teach you how to fundraise. And I thought that was really, really compelling. And what a great pitch on her part, right? To kind of reach the audience. And I can tell you directly, there were some women that said, you know what, I'm going to sign up for that because I need that. I'm not good at that. And so, Audrey, can you talk a bit about the skill set, some of the fears and challenges that people have about fundraising? And you've had this stellar career in fundraising. What are the things that you did to develop your expertise and your successes along the way?
Well, thanks, Mary. So, when I started in development, again, I had a mass communications, public relations. I knew nothing about fundraising. And my boss for the theater threw this folder on my desk that said Friends of the Theater. And I was like, wait a second, actress, publicist, I don't know anything about fundraising. And he said, don't worry about it, kid, we'll learn together. And I was like, oh, okay, well, if he doesn't have huge expectations of me, I guess I can't go wrong. But what I learned is that actually the fundraising part of my job became my favorite part because it was so fascinating. I was meeting with people, I was having conversations with people. And really, the whole thing about fundraising, people are like, oh, I can't ask for money. I hate asking for money. I really think that we have the wrong idea about fundraising. Fundraising is really an invitation. I wish that we could get rid of the word fundraising, and I like to use the word invitation because we invite people to come to events. We invite people to come and see our students, perform or do something at our organization, or we invite our benefactors and alums to come and participate in something, right? And those are all invitations. And we add the invitation of supporting the event. And if you take it out of the context of asking for money or fundraising, one, it becomes less scary, but two, it also becomes more relational. And fundraising is all about relationships. It is all about relationships. And my great mentor, one of my great mentors, a man by the name of Hank Rosso, and he wrote one of the first fundraising books, Achieving Excellence in Fundraising. And he said, our work is teaching people, it's the gentle art of teaching people the joy of giving. And I think, yeah, I can do that, right? That was a total mind shift for me from what I thought fundraising was to then thinking about teaching people the joy of giving. And I have seen people light up when they see their student receiving an award or they see their student crossing across the stage when they graduate from college or from high school. And that's really what fundraising is, right? It's that transference of passion and that joy and inviting people to be a part of that. And so that's what we teach. At St. Mary's, we really focus on how can you be the most effective development professional? How can you really understand that relationships are core to everything that we do? And we actually talk about metanoia and creating change agents, creating people who will go out into the world and change the world by inviting people to be a part of the great work of the organization. That's fundraising. That's what we do.
The joy of giving, how could that not resonate? And it kind of takes that shift, right?
Yeah.
The concern that people have about asking, about thinking through and strategizing about the joy of giving, what matters to the person that you're talking to. So Audrey, as we wrap up, first off, do you want to spend just a moment on talking through the nonprofit certificate, and then your
Sure.
just
So
so
just
people, if they're
real,
interested, can see the courses and the
you
topic?
bet. And the nonprofit certificate, I often recommend to students who are interested in, maybe you've been in a for-profit and you want to learn more about the nonprofit sector, you want to get involved in the nonprofit sector. The certificate is a great way to build out your knowledge of and your background of nonprofits. And so it's 4 courses. So it's pretty straightforward. You could start next term in just a couple of weeks. We have a term starting, and you could finish in basically 4 terms. You take 1 course a term. We offer one. And so we've got a strategic nonprofit management. We've got the community engagement partnerships. Because again, our work really relies on working with partners, other nonprofits, government agencies, that sort of thing. We have a fund development and financial management. So I always say it's the fiduciary responsibility. We have to raise money, but we also have to take good care of the money that we bring in. And so we do the fundraising, but we also look at the financial management. And then, of course, nonprofit human resource management, because there are some slight differences to the nonprofit sector than the for-profit sector. So that's our certificate. Pretty quick and easy. And it's a great program. I have amazing faculty, just 4 really stellar individuals. And the 2 of them are from out of state. Dr. Joseph Linton is from Florida, and Dr. Sarah Wiley is from St. Louis. And then I have 2 local individuals, 2 gentlemen that have a ton of experience in the not-for-profit sector. And Dave and Dan teach the other 2 courses. So that's our nonprofit certificate. Our curriculum for the MA in Philanthropy and Development is 10 courses. They're all 3-credit courses, so it's 30 total credits. We have an intro and basically history of philanthropy and development. Foundations of development is really learning the basics of development, learning how to do annual fund and direct mail and write a development plan. Donor relations and communications, again, we were saying earlier, that's a really important part of the nonprofit sector, communicating with donors. Legal issues and ethics. And we have an amazing professor out of San Francisco, Dr. Janice Galpetti, that teaches that course. Academic research and writing, we require that course because you will have to do a capstone as part of our master's. And you get to choose what you want to do your capstone in. And I always love seeing what the students select because they're always fascinating capstones. And I learn as much from my students as I hope they learn from me. Transformational leadership. We have a doctoral, so Dr. Beverly Brooks Thompson teaches the leadership course, and she has a doctorate in leadership. Board and volunteer management, and strategic giving. And strategic giving is really capital campaigns, major gifts, planned giving, and strategic planning as well, which is a big part of the nonprofit sector, planning for our organizations. So those are our programs. I know that was a really quick walk through them. We're accepting applications right now, and we can, the 2 people that you would work with in our admissions team, Karen Chappell and Stacia Stone, and we can connect you with them. We're accepting applications right now for the spring program for nonprofit management. Our master's in philanthropy and development only starts once a year. So we're right now accepting applications for summer of 2025. And if you have any questions and want to get a hold of me, there's my contact information. So quick run through the program.
That's great. Thanks, Audrey. Okay, so as we wrap up, because we do want to allow time for Q&A, if people have some questions or comments, could you talk briefly about resources here in the Twin Cities, organizations that you might recommend if someone wants to go out and do some initial research? And then the
Absolutely.
last part of it is, what are 3 key takeaways that you want to leave our participants today to think through? You've given some really good insights and feedback and perspectives, but what are some takeaways that you want everyone to finish up with? And then we'll open it up.
So there are a lot of organizations to get involved with. If you're interested in fundraising or learning more about fundraising, the Association of Fundraising Professionals Minnesota chapter, it's a great group of development professionals. They meet on a monthly basis. They have webinars and other programs, but it's a great group to work with. The Minnesota Council of Nonprofits is a huge resource because again, they're not just fundraising; they're on the program side and the finance and accounting side, and they have grant writing seminars, and they have fundraising seminars, and they have program evaluation seminars. And so they're a great organization. They do a huge fall conference, and there are a couple thousand people at this conference. It's a great place to network and get to know people. There's the Minnesota Planned Giving Council. There's just really a lot of opportunities to get engaged. And I always say, just don't be afraid to put yourself out there. And if you are afraid, don't be afraid to ask me. And I'm happy to introduce you. I'm happy to take you to a meeting and introduce you to people because I know sometimes it's hard to, be with people that you don't know or kind of make that. That's okay. Well, I'll introduce you to all sorts of people. I'm happy to do that. Um, I think some takeaways. The one thing I want you to remember is that there's huge opportunity in the nonprofit sector. So I want you to really seriously consider a career in the nonprofit sector. We have far more jobs than we have applicants for. We are looking, if you go to the Minnesota Council of Nonprofit, they have a website. There are hundreds of jobs out there right now that people are trying to fill. Hundreds of jobs. It's almost frightening that there are so many jobs that are going unfilled. And then that goes back to not being able to provide the services and the things that our clients need because we don't have the staff. It's just awful, right? So I really want you to consider a career in the nonprofit sector. It's life-giving work. I just feel blessed to have worked with some very impressive organizations doing really important work. The Red Cross, the Cancer Society, St. Mary's University, right? Really having an opportunity to invite people to be a part of the work that we do. Don't be afraid to do informational interviews. And again, if you need help, getting in the door for informational interviews. The nonprofit sector is unlike, in many ways, the for profit sector in that people will give you their time. They're like, sure, I'd be happy to meet your friend Audrey. I'd be happy to do an informational interview with you. And they'll tell you about their journey and how they got to where they are and how they ended up in the nonprofit sector and, what they're doing and what they believe were the opportunities afforded to them being in the nonprofit sector. Um, Work on your writing skills, work on your communication skills, picking up the phone. And I always say, volunteer for the Twin Cities Public Television Phonathon or Minnesota Public Radio's Phonathon or your university's Phonathon, because the skills that you build there, that ability to pick up the phone and talk to total strangers, will serve you well no matter where you go in life, even if you're in a for-profit, a not-for-profit, having those skills to be able to do cold calling or picking up the phone and talking to people, really important work.
Excellent. Excellent recap. Thank you so much. Before we open it up, I just want to briefly remind people that we've got 3 more of these webinars coming up on thought leadership from our program directors here at St. Mary's. The next one is on Wednesday, February 26th, called AI Yourself, a discussion on continued professional development strategies, and that will be hosted by Elisa DeSalvo, who is our program director in the accounting program. On Wednesday, March 26th, Dr. Paul Kotz will speak on the topic of the science of well-being. And the last one we've got scheduled, and we will, by the way, have more ready to go later this year, is the one that I'm teaching on April 30th on Wednesday. And that's around exploring entrepreneurship, the myths versus the realities. So thank you for your time here with us. And now we'd like to open it up if anyone has any comments or questions or feedback for us. Kayla, I feel like you should say something.
Yeah, I have a question for Audrey. Audrey, my
Yeah.
name is Roberta.
Yes.
I missed
Hi.
yeah, hi. I missed a little bit, and I know that it's posted there for me. I was having a meeting at the county, so I just did miss some few. But I think what I'm getting from this is there are a lot of opportunities in the nonprofit sector. And what about even if you don't have a degree in nonprofit? Then probably you might have to take a certificate course, or you can start now doing something like volunteer work, or is that what you were saying?
Right. That's a great question, Roberta. So, if you don't have a degree in nonprofit, that doesn't mean that you can't work in a nonprofit because there are transferable skills. So, Roberta, what do you currently do? What is your work currently?
Yeah, so I have a bachelor's in human resources, and so I did some HR work there, and I also have a master's in counseling psych. So I've been working in, doing diagnostic assessments on mental health issues. I'm just getting a little burnout, so I'm trying to use, like you said, transferable skills to go into something, and anything that has to do with government and things like that.
Right. And so you have skills that are absolutely transferable to many of our nonprofits. So counseling, psych, whether it's for instance, an organization like Lutheran Social Services, or working with displaced families and families who may be dealing with abusive relationships, right? So what you already know is transferable to a nonprofit, and you could absolutely get a job with a nonprofit. You may decide to pursue something like our certificate to give you more um, specific knowledge about the nonprofit sector and how it works. But
Mhm.
um, you know what you're doing and your skill sets, your education, are absolutely transferable to the nonprofit sector.
Mhm. And I'm looking to get more into the business area of things rather than, the mental health side of things. And the other question I have a friend who have an associate degree, I think a bachelor's rather in the area of business, and she has done compliance and Teresa, what have you done? Business management. And so she's looking to see if she can use her background in business management. She had worked in the banking sector, whether it's transferable into any nonprofit areas.
Again, absolutely, because nonprofits need really skilled business people to be running the business side of the house. So the finance, the accounting, the bills, receivable, payable, right? All of those things. So it's absolutely transferable to the nonprofit sector. And if she wants to talk more, or if you want to talk more, feel free to reach out to me.
Okay.
My email is really easy. It's a Kintzi, my last name Kintzi at SMU mn.edu, and I'm
Mhm.
happy to talk to you a little
Okay.
bit more just to kind of help you sort through this. But
Mhm.
I've worked with a lot of people who have been coming out of the for profit. So they were downsized out of Target, or they were downsized out of Dayton Hudson, and they really didn't want to work in the for profit anymore. They wanted to do something that they thought would be more meaningful. And so I helped them make the transition into the not for profit sector. And they just love that work, right?
Mhm. Thank you so much. And I like the fact that you said if you want me to introduce you, I will do that. So I'm looking forward to that. I'll send you an email this evening. Thank you.
Perfect.
Mhm.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Roberta.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Wonderful. I was wondering what was going on there. So I am Kayla Moore, formerly known as Kayla Torres. I'm pretty sure no one here knows that. I graduated back in like 2011. So I graduated with a communications degree in public relations, and just listening to the last person that had questions about having a degree in therapy. So I currently work for an emergency shelter in the Illinois area. So something great that like if someone with a background in therapy, there are coordinator positions, there are director positions, there are manager positions that you can apply to, and you'd be helping youth or families or people in need in nonprofits with your degree, people who are marginalized, people who desperately need these services, not just like a sit-in office or a corporate job. So you'd actually be doing, you'd be contributing to the community in doing so.
Thanks for that, Kayla. Absolutely.
Yeah, and from your personal experience too, Keela, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and your chat. Okay, any other questions or comments? Well, Audrey, excellent job. It's always a pleasure to learn from you and to listen to you because you have so many examples and experiences, right, to share with others, and you're always very generous with providing that expertise, but also I think you're really good at encouraging people, to look at different options and if they want to pursue a career uh, in nonprofit or in philanthropy and development and fundraising and development. So thank you for your contact information. For any of you that are interested, please reach out to Audrey, or you've got information as well for our admissions people, but we'd happy to have another conversation with you and follow up if you've got some more interest. But thank you all for your time today. Appreciate it, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.